not crossed or an I not dotted in this particular instance, but the equitable arguments are on the side of this amendment, and I respectfully ask the Chair to overrule the point of order.
Does the gentlelady from Ohio wish to speak to the point of order?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I wish to speak to the point of order.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Yes, normally I enjoy working on a bipartisan basis, especially with our good colleague from Eastern Ohio, Mr. LaTourette. And so in a way I reluctantly rise in opposition to his proposal. Let me mention that in a way we're into quite a 200-year extensive history here of the rules of the House, but in essence the legislation as enacted works. And every single community that I represent that has ever asked HUD for any type of waiver, if the percentage was operating to their detriment, has been granted. And so I think the legislation as is works. It keeps the focus on reinvestment, but if a mayor, if a council wants to use more of their funds for demolition, they merely ask HUD, and quite frankly, HUD acts in quite an expeditious manner. So I think in a way this is a solution in search of a problem. And I think the gentleman, we welcome his concern about the neighborhoods of this country that have been devastated by the Wall Street-induced housing crisis and lack of regulation here in Washington. But I really don't think it's necessary. And I would support the subcommittee chair and ranking member in their concern by raising a point of order here. And, you know, I express my interest in working with the gentleman on any community you may represent that is facing this situation, because every single one that we have had that has come to us, we have resolved with HUD's full cooperation. So I would support the subcommittee chair's invoking of a point of order on this proposal.
Gentlelady yields back. The Chair is prepared to rule. The Chair finds that this amendment explicitly supersedes existing law, namely the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. The amendment therefore constitutes legislation in violation of Clause 2 of Rule 21. The point of order is sustained and the amendment is not in order.
For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Price of North Carolina, page 134, after line 14, insert the following new section, Section 235. Notwithstanding any other provision of the United States Housing Act of 1937, 42 U.S.C. 143(7)(f), any amounts made available under this title under the heading Public Housing Operating Fund.
Mr. Chairman, I ask you now to consent that the reading be dispensed with.
Objection seeing none, so ordered. Gentleman from Iowa.
Mr. Chairman, I reserve a point of order on the gentleman's amendment.
Point of order is reserved. The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I rise today to offer an amendment that is of great importance to some of the strongest and best managed housing authorities in our country. Currently, housing authorities in our districts receive federal funds through two distinct streams. One funds day-to-day operations, and the other provides capital funds for construction projects and important modernizations to our nation's housing stock. Both streams are currently underfunded, not only in this bill, but also in the fiscal 2013 administration request. Now, I believe it's prudent to maintain these two distinct funding streams. But some of our housing authorities do need additional flexibility in tough funding years. Currently, some well-performing housing authorities, like the Raleigh Housing Authority in my district, have created efficiencies in their operating budget and pinched pennies in every way imaginable. Unfortunately, in order to reallocate these operations savings to urgent capital needs, they have to go through a very cumbersome and cost-ineffective process, that is, HUD's Operating Fund financing program. This program requires authorities to go through a financial middleman rather than just letting authorities use their operating funds and savings directly. This process costs unneeded interest payments and it adds unnecessary red tape. While I hope that the authorizers will be able to improve and streamline this process, I propose that this committee allow housing authorities to use unused operating funds for capital projects directly without having to go through the operating fund financing program. My amendment is narrow in scope, as it's targeted to fiscal 2013 funds and existing reserves only. It's not prospective. This stopgap solution would provide flexibility for housing authorities, incentivize the wise spending of operating dollars, and help clear up the public housing capital improvement backlog at a time when the construction industry is still reeling from the recession. This amendment would be a win for Americans who need public housing and a win for Americans who are looking for jobs. Although I believe this is not a new endeavor for the Transportation and Housing Appropriations Bill, indeed it's a continuation of the Public Housing Operating Fund offset discussion that we held last year. I understand that there is a point of order, so I'll register the hope that the authorizers can conclude their work to address this issue before the end of the year. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Does the gentleman from Iowa continue to reserve his point of order?
I do continue to reserve, yes.
For purpose.
I insist on my point of order.
Okay. Will state his point of order.
Mr. Chairman, I make a point of order against the amendment because it proposes to change existing law and constitutes legislation in an appropriation bill and therefore violates Clause 2 of Rule 21. The rule states in pertinent part, an amendment to a general appropriation bill shall not be in order if changing existing law. The amendment waives existing law. I ask for a ruling of the chair.
Does any other member wish to be heard on the point of order? None. The chair is prepared to rule. The chair finds that this amendment supersedes existing law. The amendment therefore constitutes legislation in violation of Clause 2 of Rule 21. The point of order is sustained, and the amendment is not in order. Gentlelady from California.
I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members. I rise in opposition to this underlying bill, the Republican Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Appropriations Bill for the coming fiscal year, commonly referred to as THUD. This bill drastically underfunds critical transportation, infrastructure, and housing programs. First, on transportation. The American Society of Civil Engineers 2009 report for America's infrastructure estimated that there is a $549.5 billion shortfall in investments in roads and bridges and an additional $190.1 billion shortfall in investments in transit. Yet this bill provides no funds for the Transportation Investment Generating Economic Recovery Program, better known as TIGER. Now, TIGER would finance a wide variety of innovative highway, bridge, and transit projects in urban and rural communities across the country, provided there is sufficient funding. One such project is the Crenshaw-LAX Transit Corridor in Los Angeles County, a light rail project that will run through my district. TIGER grants could be used to finance stations along this corridor in the communities of Leimert Park and Westchester, thereby ensuring that these communities have access to light rail. Last week I introduced H.R. 5976, the TIGER Grants for Job Creation Act, which would provide a supplemental emergency appropriation of $1 billion over the next 2 years for the TIGER program, and 48 of my colleagues have already co-sponsored the bill. Last night I offered an amendment to fully fund TIGER at the requested level without cutting funding for other programs. Representatives Betty McCollum, Barbara Lee, Emmanuel Cleaver, Karen Bass, Laura Richardson, Bobby Rush, and Doris Matsui joined me in offering this amendment. The Republicans objected to this amendment to their appropriations bill because it was not in order under their rule. So this bill has no funding for this critical program to create jobs by rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. Why did we have so much support on this legislation? Why do we have so many people who are signing on to basically beg for TIGER funding? It is because TIGER funding will create millions of jobs. It's because jobs are needed so desperately in this economy. It is because not only will we create millions of jobs, our infrastructure is in great disrepair. We have bridges that have been designated as unsafe. We have roads. We have water projects. We have all kinds of infrastructure needs that are unmet. This is the least that the American public could expect. This transportation bill is being waited on in many communities across this country. People thought when we passed this bill that we truly was going to expand job opportunities, that we truly was going to repair the infrastructure. But we find that this bill does not do this. But in addition to the disappointment that we're all experiencing because of the objection to repair of the infrastructure and job creations, we find that the same thing is happening in housing. We bemoan the fact that our veterans are homeless and they're on the streets, and that our shelters are all full, and that when we go into many of these communities, not only in our inner cities, but in our rural areas also, we find that people are not only sleeping on the streets, but under these bridges that are in great disrepair. This legislation cuts money from the homeless program. This will cut $231 million in homeless assistance grants compared to the President's budget request. At this level, HUD would be unable to fund all renewals of existing grants, jeopardizing assistance to approximately 25,000 of our most vulnerable citizens, that is. This bill provides less than $2 billion for public housing capital fund, despite a $30 million backlog of needed repairs. This is a huge cut, even when compared to funding during the Bush administration. In fact, in fiscal year 2008, the capital account received $2.4 billion in funding. This underfunding means that we'll continue to lose public housing units as they fall into disrepair and long-term capital needs are neglected. The people who are serviced by this account are vulnerable, and so I would simply ask that this be given some real consideration. Yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Gentleman from Georgia, what purpose does the gentleman seek recognition? Does the gentleman ask to strike the last word? The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to strike the last word. Americans need to know that Tea Party Republican obstructionism has brought us to the brink of yet another manufactured crisis. We have less than 2 days to pass critical highway and student loan bills that will keep Americans on the job and prevent student loans from doubling. Yet, Tea Party Republicans are wasting time on frivolous amendments and on a purely meritless, political, and partisan vote to hold the Attorney General in contempt. Reports indicate that bipartisan Senate leadership has reached a deal on student loans and the highway bill as well, a deal which is now being blocked in the House by the Tea Party Republicans. This is not governing, ladies and gentlemen. It's Tea Party gridlock. Americans long for a Congress that is capable of honest debate and compromise in solving the important issues of the day. That's what the founders and the framers intended of us. It's been over 100 days since the Senate passed a bipartisan highway bill with 74 votes. While the House Tea Party Republicans quibble, they put 1.9 million jobs at risk. Mr. Speaker, if the Tea Party Republicans prevent a deal on student loans, over 7.4 million students will see their interest rates double, costing students $6 billion. They have brought us to the brink of a government shutdown in February of 2011. Last summer, they brought the country to the brink of default and caused the first downgrade in the history of the United States of our credit rating. This year, they opposed the middle-class tax cut, and they have successfully ignored and blocked the President's Job Act. The Speaker should listen. Mr. Speaker, we should listen to the American people, not the big-dollar corporate backers of the Tea Party. I myself never knew that any of the real Tea Partiers of 1776 were millionaires or even wealthy. They were people like the working people of today. We call them the middle class. Today, we are debating cut after draconian cut to our nation's transportation and housing programs, which impact and hurt the middle class. These cuts put good middle-class jobs at risk. They make it harder for small businesses to operate, and they cause harm to low-income Americans who are struggling to put food on the table and a roof over their heads. The Tea Party millionaire Republicans will spend all week circling the toilet bowl drain and debating these amendments that have no chance of becoming law, when we should be lowering student loan rates and passing a long-term highway bill. Mr. Speaker, this is a great country, but how long can we withstand the best efforts of this millionaire Tea Party Republican Congress to bring America to its knees? I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Indiana.
Mr. Speaker, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, it is no secret to anyone in this chamber that the American people are unhappy with Congress. In fact, our approval ratings could only be described as terrible. As much as television personalities might like to analyze why, I don't think it's difficult to understand. Time and time again, Mr. Speaker, our work ignores their priorities. Now, under Republican leadership, we have spent months arguing over eliminating regulations, shrinking government, and crippling the Obama administration. Yet, since the lowest point of economic downturn in 2008, the American people have cared mostly about two things: good jobs and stable housing. These are issues that have hit the African American community especially hard, which is why I come to the floor today with several of my colleagues from the Congressional Black Caucus. Today, Mr. Speaker, unemployment among African Americans is above 13%, much higher than the national average. Concerns about stable housing are really nothing new, but they have been especially difficult since the start of our recession. In fact, 42% of homeless families with children are African American. So, we were all glad to see the House take up the Transportation HUD bill this week. We hope to see some relief for our struggling communities, but sadly, this bill falls short. It fails to adequately fund project-based Section 8 rental assistance for low-income families. That means over 1.2 million families, Mr. Speaker, would be at risk of losing their homes. These are primarily seniors, families with children, and people with disabilities, including many who are in the Great Hoosier State, my district. The bill cuts homeless assistance grants, leaving an estimated 25,000 people without the assistance they need to get back on their feet. It entirely eliminates the Choice Neighborhood Program. In Indianapolis, we need these funds to rebuild blighted public housing projects, improve economic development, and job opportunities in surrounding neighborhoods for low-income families. It also eliminates the Sustainable Communities, which coordinates federal, state, and local public housing investments, helping communities make the best with limited funding. I also want to add that I plan to strongly oppose any amendment that makes it harder to enforce the Fair Housing Act. Congress should not restrict HUD's work to end housing discrimination, intentional or unintentional. These cuts, Mr. Speaker, strike at the very heart of what my constituents care about, having a stable place for their families to live and stay. Over the last several months, Mr. Speaker, there has been one topic we have all agreed on: transportation projects equal jobs. Now, sadly, this bill defunds some of our most important job-creating programs. It eliminates funding for Tiger Grants, which have put thousands of people to work across this country. My district received one of these grants to construct our great cultural trail. And many of my constituents worked to construct this trail. And today, it is absolutely revitalizing neighborhoods and growing businesses and creating long-term job opportunities. This bill also eliminates funding for high-speed rail, which early estimates predict could have created thousands of jobs in the great Hoosier State. Now, of course, there are other issues, but there are too many to name at this time. But in talking today, Mr. Speaker, I simply want to express my disappointment. This week, we are finally considering the one bill each year that must address top priorities for all Americans: jobs and housing. Instead, we're cutting programs. My question to these people, Mr. Speaker, and those obstructionists: what are you expecting our communities to do? These are programs that work. They employ our constituents, Mr. Speaker, and they also improve our society. Thank you, and I yield back.
Who seeks recognition? Gentlelady from New York.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, here we are once again. We find ourselves debating a bill that is under veto threat due to the Republicans' my way or the highway posture. Mr. Speaker, last month saw the largest drop in construction jobs in 2 years. Workers who joined the more than 2.2 million construction workers who are out of work. However, instead of providing certainty to our nation's construction workers by investing in the Tiger program and light-speed rail, the Republican majority has actually zeroed these programs out completely. Apparently, the majority seems to only believe in certainty when it means historically low tax rates for multimillionaires and billionaires. Mr. Speaker, the majority's lack of investment in our nation's infrastructure is bad enough. Unfortunately, it gets even worse. At a time when the need for HUD programs are growing, this bill drastically undercuts homeless assistance grants, putting 25,000 Americans at risk of losing assistance. It jeopardizes assistance to homeowners attempting to stay in their homes and actually zeroes out the Choice Neighborhoods program. Why? Mr. Speaker, why would we essentially eliminate a program that improves economic development and viability and job opportunities for our nation's most vulnerable is beyond my ability to comprehend. Mr. Speaker, the American people have made it abundantly clear that the #1 priority of the 112th Congress ought to be job creation. By bringing this bill to the floor, the majority is saying to the American people that not only doesn't their unemployed status or opinion matter, but don't expect any relief from this Republican-led Congress as our nation struggles to cope with the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. Mr. Speaker, this is just totally unbelievable, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. The clerk will read.
Page 134, line 15. This title may be cited as the Department of Housing and Urban Development Appropriations Act, 2013. Title III, Related Agencies, Access Board, Salaries and Expenses, $7,400,000. Federal Maritime Commission, Salaries and Expenses, $25 million.
For purposes, the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Brown of Georgia, page 135, line 9. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $900,000. Page 150, line 9. After the dollar amount, insert increased by $900,000.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 5 minutes in support.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment would reduce the proposed funding for salaries and expenses for the Federal Maritime Commission by $900,000. This is not a cut. This is just to keep those salaries at what they are, to cap it at the 2012 levels. This is one of 13 offices which would receive increases for salaries or administrative expenses under the underlying bill. I urge support of my amendment, which would just freeze these salaries, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Iowa.
I rise in opposition to claim
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman, and I rise to oppose the amendment. The Federal Maritime Commission is responsible for resolving disputes between shippers, both foreign and domestic, and the public, protecting consumers from unfair business practices, and monitoring ocean transportation and trade. The increase in this account has to do with the annualization of already personnel on board and increases in the claims and workload of the Federal Maritime Commission. To reduce this account, you would affect the backlog of cases and claims, thus costing businesses, exporters, and ports time and money while they wait for the FMC to adjudicate their claim. Usually we're in the business of trying to reduce backlogs and delays in doing business, and so with that I would urge a no vote on this amendment, and I yield back the balance.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I will be very brief. I merely want to concur in the position of the chairman of the subcommittee and urge a no vote on the amendment. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The questions on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Georgia. Those in favor signify so by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Georgia.
Request a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Florida will be postponed. Clerk will read.
Page 135, line 12. National Railroad Passenger Corporation Office of Inspector General, Salaries and Expenses, $25 million. National Transportation Safety Board, Salaries and Expenses, $102,400,000. Neighborhood Reinvestment Corporation, payment to the Neighborhood Reinvestment Corporation, $145,300,000.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Brown of Georgia, page 137, line 13. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $12,300,000. Page 150, line 9. After the dollar amount, insert increased by $12,300,000.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Funding for the Neighborhood Reinvestment Corporation is over $12 million higher than what the President's budget request was. Now, the President and I don't typically see eye to eye on most spending issues, but I'm proud to support his requested level of funding for the Neighborhood Reinvestment Corporation. Why don't we show the American people that we are serious about our nation's fiscal crisis and that both parties are capable of working together by supporting my amendment that would go back to the President's requested funding level for this for the Neighborhood Reinvestment Corporation and would save the American taxpayers over $12 million. I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Chairman, I claim the time in opposition.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So this is one of those cases we've gone back and forth here today with the gentleman from California. This must be the 8th or 9th of these, and it's hard to find ways of being very creative or original about what you're saying. But the interesting thing here is that some of the time he has been going back to whatever that we had done several years ago, at some point in the past, arbitrarily. Here, of course, he is supporting the President's position. I was not aware that the gentleman from California supported the President's position in much of anything. And so...
Georgia.
Excuse me. Thank you very much. Please forgive me. You don't even look alike, you know. I think I'm mistaking you for a different member of the California delegation. In any case, I thank the gentleman from Iowa for correcting me. In any case, I rise in opposition to this amendment. You know, the gentleman's amendment would take the position of this subcommittee down from by $12.3 million. Basically, the position of the subcommittee has been that we were providing a little bit more for the NeighborWorks program than the President requested, and a little bit less for the HUD counseling program than the President requested, but together they would be about the same. You know, NeighborWorks, which is what the Neighborhood Reinvestment Corporation's common name is a major nonprofit organization that operates all over the country. It has affiliates in 50 states. I'm sure it has an affiliate somewhere in the gentleman's district. And the NeighborWorks program is a group that we relied on very heavily in the very height of the foreclosure crisis 3 or 4 years ago to do counseling, to go out there and actually contract with and manage the process of providing counseling for hundreds of thousands of people who were engaged in or subject to foreclosure. And so we on our side, on this side, in this branch at least, have felt that NeighborWorks was a very good organization. And this is in large part why we have given them a little bit more and a little bit less to the HUD program. And we've argued the HUD program last night. They leverage something close to $4 billion in direct investment to serve low and moderate income families through all of their affiliates, through all the work that they do. It's a very, very good, reliable organization that we've come to value very highly. They have administered this foreclosure mitigation counseling program that gives targeted assistance to families at risk of losing their homes. The gentleman seeks to cut this account because it is above the President's request. But I think I have explained that we're slightly above on this one and slightly below on the other one. And again, I would say I was not aware that the gentleman from Georgia, I went back to California again, didn't I? The gentleman from Georgia was such a fan of the President's request numbers, valued it so highly. So I believe, and I think that my chairman believes, that NeighborWorks is deserving of this small increase, and I believe that Chairman Latham has thoughtfully targeted resources in this area, and I hope the amendment will be defeated. I urge the members to vote no.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from Iowa.
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman. rise to oppose the gentleman's amendment. NeighborWorks really is a program that has some metrics in place to make sure that the dollars are used correctly in a proper way. In Iowa and across the country, about every dollar that goes through NeighborWorks, actually there's about $48 in non-federal direct investment because of it. And I just want to reiterate, we've gone through every line in this appropriation bill, tried to make decisions that would increase growth, job creation, try to do the very best job we could. We've looked at every area. There are some priorities, things that actually work, that we've tried to sustain funding for. And I just don't want folks to forget, overall in this bill we are nearly $4 billion below last year's funding level, a cut of $4 billion, $2 billion below the President's request. And I think as one gentleman here today stated, the largest percentage increase, or excuse me, reduction of any appropriation bill yet to come to the floor. So we're trying to be fiscally responsible, to actually prioritize spending in this bill to things that actually work. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would urge a no vote on this amendment.
Questions on the gentlelady from Ohio.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like to rise in opposition to this amendment and to say to the gentleman from Georgia, I don't really know where you might live in Georgia, but imagine neighborhoods in our country where there is no private lender with competitive rates. Imagine neighborhoods that are crammed at the edges with payday lenders who are more than willing to bilk people who have checks to cash, maybe Social Security checks, and they charge them for that. Imagine a neighborhood where there's no credit union, where you can get no church-run credit union, a multilingual neighborhood with no lending arm of any reputable institution. And if there is somebody in the neighborhood willing to make a loan shark, they charge high fees. Imagine the trouble that a family can get into. Imagine how difficult it is in those neighborhoods to accumulate capital to make a loan, because everything's taken out, nothing's put back in. NeighborWorks is one of the few institutions in this country that has proven itself that works in exactly those kinds of neighborhoods, that tries to save families and give them a chance to get on the ladder up to opportunity. In this time when we know we've had the largest transfer of wealth in American history from Main Street to Wall Street, where people have had their equity taken away, including in neighborhoods like I'm talking about, where people were beginning to own their own homes for the first time, where we needed counseling, financial counseling, we needed mortgage counseling, we needed advice on if you're going to buy a home, what a down payment is, how much do you earn, you shouldn't pay more than this out of your check so that you don't get in trouble. Trying to find reputable people to repair your home so you get a decent price on your roof and your gutters. It all seems so simple if you live in the suburbs and you got enough money and you're not living at the edge. NeighborWorks is one of those programs, particularly at this time in our country with the housing market being in the condition that it is, and with the enormous challenges facing built communities and the built environment in city after city after community, both urban and rural. It's amazing what's happened to rural small towns in this country, and the emptying out that is really historic in nature. A program like NeighborWorks has proven itself. It pays back to the American people in not losing equity, in helping capital accumulate in some of the most forgotten corners of this country. And the staff that work for it are highly trained and highly reputable. I would not want to be without it in Ohio, not in the situation that we are facing today. I'm not sure about Georgia. I would bet in Atlanta they value NeighborWorks if they have one, and I assume that they do. But you have to imagine yourself living in a place like you might not know, and for the American dream to happen, organizations like NeighborWorks are absolutely essential. So I oppose the gentleman's amendment. I think it may be well-intentioned, but I think is going to achieve exactly the wrong result. And I think the chairman of the full committee and the ranking member, Mr. Ulver, have reached an accommodation here to help our housing market recover in some of the most forgotten places and not to have any more hemorrhaging of equity across this country. And I yield back my time.
Gentlelady yields back her time. Questions on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Georgia. Those in favor signify so by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Gentleman from Georgia.
Mr. Chair, I ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Georgia will be postponed. The clerk will read. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition? The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chair very much. Mr. Chairman, I was on the floor about half an hour ago and went back to my office stung by the defeat at the hands of Mr. Latham and his point of order and the ruling of the parliamentarian and the chair at the time, and the interesting comments from my friend from Western Ohio, who I trust after she has the opportunity to meet with Mr. Rockakis and Mr. Kildee in Michigan and Cleveland will have a different view on whether or not the Neighborhood Stabilization Fund, without additional resources to demolish homes, is working well. But when I got back to the office, I turned on the television and I saw, I like a good Republican bashing as much as other folks, but a string of speakers came to the microphone and just bashed the lack of a Republican plan on transportation. And I'm not going to go back to 1844, but I am going to go back to September of 2009. The last bill, Safety Lou, expired in September of 2009. In September of 2009, people know the answer, you can shout it out, the President of the United States was a Democrat, Barack Obama, currently the President today. The Majority Leader in the United States Senate, shout it out if you know it, Harry Reid, Democrat of Nevada. The Speaker of the House was the first woman elected Speaker in the history of the United States, Nancy Pelosi of California. The Democratic Party controlled all three levers of the federal government. They had in position as the chairman of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee a gentleman who has forgotten more about transportation than most of us will ever learn, Jim Oberstar of Minnesota. Mr. Oberstar prepared a 6-year, fully funded, robust federal transportation 6-year reauthorization. He was not allowed by the leadership within the Democratic Party to bring that bill forward. So for people to come to the floor that say Mr. Latham's not doing his job, this negotiation that's going on the transportation authorization currently is somehow a failure of Republican leadership, I say get up and look in the mirror. You have to take a look at the fact that everybody is responsible for this mess, and everybody knows that you don't fix the nation's infrastructure unless you provide the necessary resources to fund the trust fund, and both parties are guilty of being absent without leave. But to blame it and hang it on the Republican Party is worse than nonsense. It completely ignores historical fact. And one other factoid about the President of the United States, President Obama, he has become the first president since Dwight Eisenhower to not send up his vision of a comprehensive transportation reauthorization bill. Now, a lot of people in this House weren't even born when Dwight Eisenhower was the President of the United States. But he became the first president, and our good friend and former colleague, Mr. LaHood, who's his Secretary of Transportation, he would come before the subcommittee year after year after year and no ideas. No gas tax, no vehicle miles traveled, no idea how we're going to replenish the Highway Trust Fund until this year. Until this year he came and said, I got this brainy idea. We are going to fund it with OCO, the Overseas Contingency Account that the United States has used to support our troops in conflicts around the world. It was worse than fiction. It was a fantasy. And he knew it, but he delivered it with a straight face, and I give him a lot of credit for that. But to come to the floor and attempt to hang this around the Republicans for failing to lead on transportation is laughable. Ours is the party of Teddy Roosevelt and the Panama Canal, Abraham Lincoln and the Transcontinental Railroad, Dwight Eisenhower and the interstate highway system, Ronald Reagan, George Bush all supported working wages to build our infrastructure. We will not take a back seat, nor will we be criticized by a party that completely failed in its mandate given to them in the election of 2008 to do a single thing, to employ people in the transportation sector and to move this country forward. And I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. Clerk will read.
Page 141, line 13, United States Interagency Council on Homelessness, operating expenses, $3,300,000. Title IV, General Provisions. This Act, Section 401, sums for the pay raises for programs funded in this Act shall be absorbed within the levels appropriated. Section 402, none of the funds shall be used for the planning of any program to pay the expenses of non-federal parties intervening in regulatory proceedings. Section 403, none of the funds shall remain available for obligation nor may be transferred. Section 404, the expenditure for any consulting service shall be limited to those contracts where expenditures are a matter of public record and available for public inspection. Section 405, none of the funds shall be available for obligation or expenditure through a reprogramming of funds that creates a new programming. Section 406, not to exceed 50% of unobligated balances made available for salaries shall remain available through September 30th, 2014 for each such account for the purposes authorized. Section 407, all federal agencies funded under this Act shall issue a report to the committees on all sole source contracts by no later than July 30th, 2013. Section 408, none of the funds may be obligated for any employee training that does not meet identified needs for knowledge bearing directly upon the performance of official duties. Section 409, no funds may be used to support projects that seek to use the power of eminent domain unless eminent domain is employed only for a public use. Section 410, none of the funds may be transferred except pursuant to a transfer made by this Act. Section 411, no part of any appropriation shall be available to pay the salary for any person filling a position formerly held by an employee who has left to enter the armed forces and has completed his period of active military or naval service. Section 412, no funds may be expended by any entity
Clerk will
unless...
suspend. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition? Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Garamendi of California, page 148, line 11, after entity will, insert, ensure that domestic content makes up 85% of all steel, iron, and manufactured goods, including rolling stock and.
For purpose does the gentleman from Iowa seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I reserve a point of order on the
gentleman from Iowa
amendment.
reserves a point of order. The gentleman from California is recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We just heard a rather strong plea from one of my Republican colleagues about the transportation program and whether Democrats and Republicans should continue to fight about who did what, when, or didn't do it. This amendment is something that we all ought to agree to. This amendment is something that both Democrats and Republicans should be supporting. This amendment is about American jobs, not foreign jobs, not about shifting our jobs overseas, but rather about bringing those jobs back home. This amendment is about making it in America. This amendment is about no longer allowing our tax money to be spent on foreign-made equipment, but rather to allow our tax money and require that our tax money be spent on American-made equipment so that there will be American jobs. This is not a Republican or a Democratic issue. This is an all-American issue. This is about making it in America. It simply says that the current 60% requirement is insufficient and that we ought to have a higher requirement of 85%. And I will argue strongly, and I think correctly, that 85% is achievable. I'll give two examples. A recent contract for the BART new trains, Bay Area Rapid Transit trains. One bidder, a French company, Alstom, said that they could build those trains 95%. A second bidder, foreign, Bombardier, said they would do it at 66%. Unfortunately, BART decided to go with the 66% because it was a couple of percentage points cheaper. $1 billion of American jobs was lost. Within a month after that, Los Angeles wanted to build some new transit cars. Siemens said they could build those transit cars at 85% American content. They lost that bid to a Korean company because there was a couple of percentage points difference. Again, millions of American jobs, or millions of dollars spent overseas, and American jobs lost. It's time for us to bring the jobs home. It's time for us to onshore. It's time for us to make it in America, and it's time for us as Democrats and Republicans to do just that, and that's what this amendment does. I suspect it'll be ruled out of order. What a shame. What a shame that we cannot stand here on the floor, amend a bill that's going to, over time, spend $60 billion and not require that that money, our tax money, be spent in America. What's wrong with making it in America? Oh, I suppose it has to do with some point of order. Do you think the American public really wants to hear a point of order, or do they want to hear about American-made equipment and American jobs? No, we'll do a point of order, which I will appeal and probably lose, and thousands upon thousands of American jobs will be lost because of a point of order, rather than for this House to stand up and say, we're going to make it in America. We're going to spend our tax money on American jobs, on American-made equipment. So give me your point of order, and let's see what the American public has to say about your point of order. I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Iowa.
I would continue to reserve and strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman. You know, we had a markup this morning in appropriations, and I supported an amendment about American content, and I believe that this is probably a very, very good amendment. To be consistent, and I have raised points of orders against some things that I support today, my good friend from Ohio, other amendments that I would otherwise be supportive of if they were not breaking precedent to the rules of the House. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I insist on my point of order. And I make a point of order against the amendment because it proposes to change existing law and constitutes legislation in the appropriation bill and therefore violates Clause 2 of Rule 21. The rule states in pertinent part, an amendment to a general appropriation bill shall not be in order if changing existing law. The amendment requires a new determination. I ask for a ruling of the chair.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the point of order? The gentleman from California.
On the point of order, I thank the chairman for his thoughts on the issue and for his consistency. I cannot thank him, but I think I understand that we seem to operate on rules unless we don't want to operate on those rules. And I understand that the chairman is interested in this issue and has worked as chairman of the committee, of the subcommittee, to try to raise the level of American-made. I thank him for that. We have an opportunity here to really take this issue up and to put aside the rules and do what's good for America. This is about billions and billions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of jobs. And we ought to put it aside. Put aside the consistency and deal with American jobs. I don't know what my opportunity will be to overrule the point of order, but I'm going to do everything I possibly can to see that we have American-made jobs and we spend our tax money on American-made equipment. I do understand the chairman's position in the bind that he's in, but sometimes consistency doesn't lead to the right result. I yield back.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on the point of order? If not, the chair is prepared to rule. As recorded in Additionalist Precedents, Volume 8, Chapter 26, Section 3, language in an appropriation bill that is subject to a point of order under Clause 2 of Rule 21, but is permitted to remain, such as by waiver in House Resolution 697, may be modified by germane amendment that does not contain additional legislation. Section 412 of the bill has been permitted to remain. The amendment by the gentleman from California would expand Section 412 to impose an additional restriction on expenditure of funds in the bill, to wit, that 85% of a certain class of goods be produced domestically. That expansion constitutes legislation. The point of order is sustained. For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I ask to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you for that opportunity. I have an amendment that would prohibit funds from being used to enforce congressionally mandated temporary flight restrictions, or TFRs, for sports stadiums. These permanent TFRs, to be quite honest with you, are impractical, they're ineffective, and they create serious problems for hundreds of thousands of pilots, countless air shows, aerial surveyors, and a whole lot of other small businesses and individuals that utilize aviation. In 2004, Congress mandated the FAA to impose permanent TFRs in the airspace above and around sports stadiums with a seating capacity greater than 30,000. Think of these restricted airspace as restricted airspace bubbles that basically extend 3,000 feet high, and they have a 3.5 mile wide radius. That is in effect 1 hour prior to the event and 1 hour just after the event. And in any given year, there are roughly 3,000 of these stadium TFRs. Now, proponents of these claim that they bolster national security and mitigate an aerial threat. And I can't help but laugh, absolutely laugh at that assertion. First, there's absolutely no real-time mechanism or capability to prevent an aerial attack originating within or outside the 3.5 miles or 3,000 feet above ground level. And the logic would apply even if the restrictions were expanded exponentially. In fact, if you take a jet traveling 500 miles an hour, it's just going to take a few seconds once it penetrates that TFR to reach that stadium. It's also very convenient that the proponents of these TFRs are exempt from the restrictions that they successfully sought after. Bottom line is the FAA doesn't want or need these congressionally mandated TFRs. In fact, the FAA publicly stated they would not issue these TFRs absent the congressional mandate, but rather they would use their existing authority to coordinate with law enforcement authorities, local law enforcement, to issue them on a case-by-case basis. And that's what we were trying to get at. Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to reiterate that these stadium TFRs do nothing to improve security. They would and I would yield time to anybody out there, any member that would like to try and make the argument while keeping a straight face that they do improve security. These TFRs are about banner towers, which is to prevent what sports groups call guerrilla advertisers from operating within the airspace around these stadiums. That's all this is about. And what was Congress's solution? We simply gave complete control of the airspace to sports teams and exempted them from their own restrictions, and I think that's wrong. Now, in light of the fact that I would like to solve this issue eventually, instead of trying to ram an issue through or try to push something through that could fail or be passed, I'd rather come up with a good piece of legislation that actually solves the problem and addresses some of the concerns. And that's basically what I was trying to do.
Would the gentleman yield?
I yield.
I thank the gentleman for his comments today, and he has been a tremendous advocate for this position. We have talked on many occasions about this particular subject. He is working very hard to resolve the issue. I would hope that we could have some public hearings, actually get real input to make sure that we make the right decisions, and I certainly would want to work with the gentleman to make sure that we do get a full hearing on this issue, that everything can be brought to light, and we can certainly, we're all concerned about homeland security, safety issues, all those things. I think the gentleman makes some very, very good points, and would just offer to do everything we can to work with him. And I would yield back to the gentleman.
I want to thank the chairman for that, for the comments, and look forward to working on this. I think this is an issue that we can solve, and an issue that we can fix ultimately for all those pilots out there, and then the folks that are concerned with that. Mr. Chairman, I would yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The clerk will read.
Page 148, line 15, section 413. No funds shall be made available to any person that has been convicted of violating the Buy American Act. Section 414, none of the funds may be used for first-class airline accommodations. Section 415, none of the funds may be provided to the Association of Community Organizations for Reform Now. Section 416, none of the funds may be used to enter into a contract with any corporation that was convicted of a felony criminal violation under federal law within the preceding 24 months. Section 417, none of the funds may be used to enter into a contract with any corporation that any unpaid federal tax liability has been assessed. Section 418, the amount by which the applicable allocation of new budget authority made by the Committee on Appropriations is $0.
Clerk will suspend. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on those amendments upon which further proceedings were postponed in the following order. Sixth Amendment by Mr. Brown of Georgia, Seventh Amendment by Mr. Brown of Georgia, Eighth Amendment by Mr. Brown of Georgia, Ninth Amendment by Mr. Brown of Georgia, Tenth Amendment by Mr. Brown of Georgia, 11th Amendment by Mr. Brown of Georgia, 12th Amendment by Mr. Brown of Georgia, 13th Amendment by Mr. Brown of Georgia, 14th Amendment by Mr. Brown of Georgia, an amendment by Mr. Chaffetz of Utah, a Second Amendment by Mr. Clintock of California, Amendment number 11 by Mr. McClintock of California, an amendment by Mr. Flake of Arizona. The Chair will reduce to 2 minutes the time for any electronic vote after the first vote in this series. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on the Sixth Amendment offered by the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Brown, upon which further proceedings are postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Sixth Amendment offered by Mr. Brown of Georgia.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and remain standing. A sufficient number having arisen